Hey, Period Party podcast people. Thank you so much for being here with me again today. Just a reminder that this is our last episode before we go on a little break, and we will be back in January. So, my guest today is Jennifer Woodward, and we are discussing a topic that impacts countless lives, and that is breast implant illness. For those unfamiliar, BII is a complex health issue associated with breast implants, and Jennifer is here to share her personal journey and professional insights. Jennifer holds a Master's of Science in Integrative Nutrition, and she is a certified functional diagnostic nutrition practitioner, and she's also a passionate advocate for women's health. We delve into the nuances of BII, exploring its prevalence, symptoms, and the impact it had on Jennifer's life as a business owner and mother of four. She generously shares her experience from the decision to have implants to the challenges faced and ultimately the process of removal. We discuss the difference between silicone and saline implants, the diagnostic process of BII, and the common warning signs that every woman should be aware of. Jennifer offers valuable advice to those suspecting BII and emphasizes the importance of self-advocacy in navigating associated health challenges. If you have breast implants and have experienced a variety of seemingly unrelated symptoms, you'll find this episode really valuable. And if you're considering implants, you should definitely pay attention to everything Jennifer shares. As a reminder, this is our last episode for the year, and we'll be back in January with new episodes. Happy holidays to you all, and thank you so much for being a part of my community. I'm grateful for each one of you, and I look forward to being back in 2024 for more podcast fun. Thanks again and enjoy this episode. Hi, Jennifer. Thank you so much for being on the podcast with me. I'm so happy that you're here.
I am thrilled to be here, Nicole. Thank you so much for having me.
Absolutely. This is going to be such a good conversation. I actually did another episode a number of years ago with someone who also had experienced breast implant illness, and it was received so well. And then when I heard from you, I was like, I really want to do this again because I feel like we've learned a lot more in the last few years about this subject. And I find that so many more women are speaking about this now, as opposed to, 4 or 5 years ago when I felt like it was very new and not a thing that was discussed at all.
Yeah, it was definitely kind of like swept under the rug. Just women didn't realize, they just didn't have that correlation between their symptoms and their implants.
Yeah, totally. I know. I completely agree. And so it's really interesting, or at least it has been for me, to see the shifts in, how we're now, like you said, correlating and connecting these things. So I guess the first thing I wanted to ask is for my listeners who might not be familiar with breast implant illness, could you just give a brief overview of what it is so that they are aware?
Yes. Yeah. So breast implant illness is really a collection of symptoms. So for a lot of women, they will complain of joint and muscle pain, chronic fatigue, memory and concentration problems. Some women actually have breathing issues. They'll have GI issues. That was a big one for me. Hair loss, depression, headaches, anxiety, even dry mouth, dry eyes, like dry skin, sort of. Again, it's these really kind of confusing symptoms that don't have a genesis. Now, these, of course, would be associated with a woman who already has, implants. So if you have implants and you've got a lot of these other symptoms, then you would present with what we would call a breast implant illness if you actually respond to a decrease in those symptoms after getting your implants out after a period of 3 months. So that's one way to test for sure if you have breast implant illness, if after 3 months of removing them, your symptoms, most of them go away.
Oh boy, I know, right? Yeah, it just makes me think of the IUD. I feel like so many women have these IUD related symptoms and they seem so unrelated and they have no idea what's causing it. And then the IUD is taken out and suddenly they're like a new person. So it makes a lot of sense, right? But yeah, you would equate the two. That's really helpful. I feel like it's so helpful. And I'm curious, do we even know how common this is right now? Like, do we have any idea around like the actual statistics?
We don't have true statistics yet. I do think that we're going to have some really good statistics like in the coming years. But again, since it's kind of like it's kind of like on the upswing for women to even realize that this could be the cause of many of their symptoms. So there aren't a ton of studies. Now, once study I can tell you is that the American Society for Aesthetic Plastic Surgeons showed that 89% of women who did complain of breast implant illness who had their implants removed did see their symptoms improve 3 months after removal. So we know for sure that there's a strong correlation between removing the implants, but we don't know for sure how many women are actually experiencing this issue. It's kind of like any other like chronic disease. You have the women who are actually diagnosed, and then you have the, hundreds of thousands, possibly millions of women who are undiagnosed but still have the symptoms.
What's so fascinating is that I had a guest on a little while ago, and she's sort of revolutionized mastectomies. And in that her and her husband focus on sensation preserving mastectomies, which I think is incredible. And it was so interesting though, because she was basically saying that she feels like breast implant illness is very rare and that it's not something that she's really encountered in her work. And I was like, really? That's so interesting, because that's not what I hear from other women. Like, what are your thoughts on that?
Well, my thoughts are that these symptoms that women experience can be multifactorial, right?
Mm-hmm.
So really the genesis of the issues is hormone imbalance in the body, right? So there's this theory that since the implants are either saline or silicone, they act as plastics in the body, right? They act as a foreign object in the body. So number one, they can increase estrogen in the body or estrogen retention. And number two, they're a foreign object in the body, just like, mercury fillings or a steel plate in the body. The body sees the substance as other, right? And again, at the same time, theoretically, it's increasing that retention of estradiol in the body, synthetic estrogen. And so it can be that women are experiencing this whole host of hormonal symptoms that kind of look like estrogen dominance, but we don't know exactly if that's because they're perimenopausal, because a lot of women, have had their implants in since their 20s or their 30s, and now in their 40s or 50s, they're experiencing these really cruddy hormonal symptoms. So they can be going through perimenopause at the same time. They might be suffering from symptoms of breast implant illness. But again, we don't know if it's from perimenopause or if it's from the implants themselves.
All right. Okay. Yeah. Well, we'll know more, I'm sure, as time goes on. I feel like that's the problem, right? Is that we tend to do the research way after the fact, and then, and then we get the data. I feel like it would be so helpful for you to share your personal story around breast implant illness. Maybe just talk a little bit about the symptoms that you first noticed, and then how they changed or progressed, and how you ended up, addressing it.
Yeah, for sure. So I did get my implants when I was 19. I actually got married when I was 19. I still can't believe my mom let me do that. Got implants the same year. We were, feeling really good about my new boobies. And it was fine, right? It was fine for what, 9 years before I started having children. One thing I do remember telling my surgeon, Nicole, even at 19, was I want to have kids one day, so I would like to be able to breastfeed. Unfortunately, that did not happen. I was not able to breastfeed with my implants. That was a huge bummer. We figured out ways around that. But that was one of my first kind of realizations, like maybe these boobs are not all they're cracked up to be, right? Ended up having 4 children. And then time flies, right? Like when you're a mom and when you're having kids and you don't realize that your body is going through all of these changes. And it wasn't until I started my work as a functional diagnostic nutrition practitioner and I began running all these functional lab tests on myself that I realized my hormones were just shot. My estrogen levels actually were really low. My progesterone levels were non-existent. My cortisol levels were in the tank. I was just depleted across the board. I had all of these raging gut infections and parasites, multiple food sensitivities, really, really low thyroid function, markers for Hashimoto's thyroiditis. I mean, the gamut of women's issues I was experiencing kind of all at the same time. And so I had worked on myself, as a practitioner. I'd hired other functional practitioners to kind of help me get through some of these roadblocks. And while we made progress, I never felt good. And I think anyone who hasn't felt good understands what I mean by that. You're again making progress. Maybe we're clearing out a gut infection. Maybe I'm using some bioidentical hormones just to kind of, subsidize my own, but I just wasn't feeling vibrant. I wasn't sleeping well. I felt very inflamed all the time. My food sensitivities were actually increasing instead of decreasing. My hair was falling out, just all sorts of fun stuff, for a 35-year-old woman. And
Awful
it
at
was
35. Right? Because you're supposed to feel great at 35. I mean, you're supposed to feel
Talked a
great at
little bit.
35 and then feel like just struggling with all those things. It must have been so debilitating.
It really was. And disempowering. I thought I kind of had this power in my hands just with data, like functional lab testing and going through these protocols. Like I was just really excited to feel my best again. Then when they weren't really achieving the level of health that I felt like I should be achieving, it got really, like I said, disempowering. And so in my work, actually with a fellow FDN, a colleague, she got into some of the woo stuff and she's like, hey, can I run this Healy scan on you? And I'm like, well, sure, I'll try anything once. And so through my computer, right, she like got my voice signature and she's running this like energy scan on me. I'm like, oh, this is such BS, whatever, but let's just do it because it's fun. And she came back and she said, your body looks pretty good, except you have all this scar tissue. I'm like, scar tissue? I've never broken a bone. I've never had a surgery. Oh, wait, actually I did have a surgery. I had some boobs put in when I was 19. And so I started talking about that with her because it really was a revelation to me. I think that women who get their implants early, we recognize those implants as part of our body. It was just part of who I was. I had not thought about it as something that was other. And so once we ran that scan, once I started talking about that with her, once I realized I've got all of this, scar tissue in my body, it started to get, a little bit unnerving for me. And I'm just kind of a all or nothing person. I'm like, if I make my mind up, I'm going to do it. So once I realized it might be my implants, I researched a surgeon. I, had a Zoom call with that surgeon. So it was 2021. I really loved her and she came recommended from other people who had an on-block capsulectomy, and we'll get to that later, I'm sure. And so I hired her and we set a date. So the ball started moving at that point.
So amazing. And it's so not amazing that you went through all of that, but so amazing that you had this random Healy session. That was really the trigger. Like, who would have thought it after doing all that testing and everything that you were doing?
Totally. Yeah, it was definitely out of the blue. It was odd.
Oh, I'm sure it was. Yeah, totally. Although, I know a number of people who use that device actually and really, really love it and swear by it. So, I feel like whatever works for everybody, if it's working for you and your clients, that's great. I am curious though, maybe we'll get into this or, maybe we can just talk about it now, about the claims about the different ingredients in breast implants in general. Because I know obviously there's silicone and there's saline and there's differences, but I feel like the majority of people who talk about breast implant illness are really talking about the mold and the other ingredients, like you said, the plastics and various other things. So I'm curious what your thoughts are on that. Like, in addition, we'll talk about saline and silicone for sure, but I'm curious about those other things that seem to be contributing to this condition.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So yes, just to break it down, there are two main types of implants. The first one is a full silicone implant. So that's silicone on the outside, it's silicone on the inside. Right now, those are called like gummy bear implants, and they tend to feel more like your breast tissue. So, a lot of women will go for those. Myself, even at 19, kind of researching through it, I had even read a little bit online at that point that maybe those weren't as safe as the saline option. So the saline option does have a saltwater solution inside a silicone bag. So the bummer is that your body's still in contact with silicone if you are getting a saline implant, something that I didn't really think about or realize at the time. Now, you talked about mold. So here is the difference between silicone and saline in that regard. With silicone, you've got a semi hard, right? Semi-hard, semi-permeable sort of implant. So nothing is really gonna, like, it can't puncture or pop, but it can slowly leak. So you can start to get a silicone drip if there is a slight puncture or hole in your implant, which I've seen, with a couple of my friends. That's when the silicone implant starts to harden. But with a saline implant 20 years ago, what they were doing was using a saline solution from a large vat of salt water, essentially. So they would suction in this saline from, a solution that wasn't necessarily completely bacterial free. That's why a lot of mold and fungus and even bacterial infections have been found in some of those older saline implants, because the water itself is a harbor for mold. All right. Yeah. I did have mine tested. I did not have any black mold in my saline implants, which is great. But, we'll talk about this later too. You want to make sure that you're going to a surgeon who is going to at least look at and then possibly test your implants, right? So that's that kind of difference between mold you're generally going to see in the saline implants, but you're going to get leaks more often from the silicone implants.
Okay. Oh,
I
wow.
think,
Okay. Oh, go ahead.
no, go ahead. Go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, okay, that explains a lot then, because I wasn't entirely sure if there was, a big difference.
Yep. Yeah, there definitely is. And theoretically, the saline could be a little bit safer because if that one pops, you are just getting this like rush of salt water through the body. If it's not contaminated with mold, it's not going to be that big of a deal. But if you've got that slow kind of leak from your silicone implant, that's when a lot of these symptoms are going to start to manifest for women, because that's going to go, throughout your body. Plastic and estrogens.
I mean, it sounds like my worst nightmare. Yeah. Okay. So that's really helpful. And do people get like one or the other more
From
than
an implant?
Yeah, like for silicone versus saline, like is one more popular than the other?
From what I have seen anecdotally, the silicone implants tend to be more popular because again, they just feel more natural. If you're spending like $10,000 to $20,000 on breast implants, you want them to be like, as close to a real breast tissue as possible. And so surgeons tend to put in the silicone implants more often than saline.
Oh, they do. Okay. Is one more expensive than the other?
I don't know the cost difference between the two. I think at the time when I had mine done, again, 22 years ago, now it was about $10,000.
Oh, wow. Yeah. Okay. That's like a
Well,
major investment. That's a huge investment. So, oh, go ahead.
No, I just said I was 19. I don't even know how I got $10,000.
I mean, I imagine maybe from your parents. I mean, yeah, like I can't even imagine, spending that at 19, really at any time. But I agree, like it makes sense because we live in a world where there's so much emphasis put on having bigger boobs. So I get it. Like I totally understand. Um, can we talk a little bit about let's see, the diagnosis process of breast implant illness? Is this just a sort of like, hey, I'm experiencing these symptoms and you just get them taken out based on that? Or is there an actual diagnostic process? Like, are there tests involved or any kind of procedures involved?
I am not an expert on this. And to my understanding, there is not a diagnostic procedure where a doctor can actually tell you, hey, you have breast implant illness. Again, it's more of like a conglomeration of symptoms that women would present with the, associated decrease in symptoms after they get those breast implants out. And again, the standard length of time is a full 3 months. So when you think about it, a lot of women, if they're feeling better in like a month or 2 or 3 months, rarely are they going to go back to their doctor and say, hey, guess what? It was breast implant illness after all. So I don't think that we have like a really great framework to get proper data at this point. Hopefully that changes in the future.
Yeah, for sure. And are there any more like obscure type symptoms that one could be looking out for? Because you mentioned a bunch of them, and I feel like it's so challenging because there's so many things that could contribute to those. And I think that may lead so many women to not look at their breast implants as being a cause, possibly.
Yeah, for me, it worsened my psoriasis. So I had scalp psoriasis. My body was like trying so hard to get rid of all these toxins. And I would go on psoriasis diets and take psoriasis supplements and take out, all of the autoimmune paleo triggers. And none of it really worked. In fact, my scalp psoriasis was getting worse. And I remember being out one day at a theme park with a friend and her kid along with mine, and realized when I went in the bathroom, I was starting to get some psoriasis around my eyes, which is on the front of my face. And I was like, oh, hell no. Like if it's on the back of my scalp, that's one thing. But if it's on the front of my face, like that makes me really, desirous of changing something to where that's not going to like impact my day to day. So psoriasis was one thing for sure that got worse with my implants and started to recede once I got them out. Some of the things that my own clients have struggled with are muscle weakness is a huge one. Systemic yeast infections was one that came up quite a bit in some of my clients. Frequent urination, numbness in fingers has actually been reported a few times. And then again, that weird one is shortness of breath. It kind of makes sense if you're pushing on or have inflammation, around the area of your lungs, but that's kind of a terrifying symptom, for women who have implants. Skin issues are a common, common symptom as well, because the body's just trying to detox.
Yeah. Do you find that it has been hard for the clients who have come to you to get a diagnosis or even have a doctor really take them seriously when they're experiencing all these symptoms? So I feel
I
like
think the
getting a
tide is
diagnosis for anything is hard these days. So I would imagine for something as obscure as this, right, it would be really even harder.
Yeah, even my own surgeon who does this en bloc capsulectomy where she's removing not only the capsule or the implant itself, but also the tissue that's encapsulated around it. So it comes out just looking like a flap of skin, which is super gross. But the body's actually really wise in how it really does capsule or encapsulate that implant to protect the rest of the body itself. Now, even she who does this routinely, in the Southern California area where lots of women are getting their implants out, could not give me a diagnosis of breast implant illness. So like I said, hopefully the tide is turning, but at this point, I've not had anyone who has come to me and said, I have a firm diagnosis of breast implant illness. And one of the, associative like kind of issues with that is that no insurance company is going to cover this. So that's the other, big issue with breast implant illness and removing one's implants based on symptoms is that it is not covered by insurance. So even if you are, you can't breathe and you're peeing all the time and you have muscle weakness and fibromyalgia and your skin's a mess, like the insurance company is like, well, bummer, you got to go pay for it out of pocket.
So unfair. I mean, because I imagine this is not a cheap surgery either, just as it isn't cheap to put them in. Oh yeah, look at your face. Yeah, I know, right?
And you want a good surgeon. Yes, you can go to any plastic surgeon, most likely, and they would be able to take this out. But, for those of you who are listening and who are concerned about possibly your own implants, again, I would look for a surgeon who has a specialty in this en bloc. So that's EN, new word, BLOC, en bloc capsulectomy, which again, you're taking out the capsule as well as the implant itself. Someone who's well-versed in that, because you don't want little bits of either implant or tissue that has been affected by the implant left in the body. We have seen that can definitely be a big problem for women because you still have some of the offending substance in the body. So you want a full removal.
Right.
It's hard to find that doctor. It is, and you don't want to go to a cheap doctor to get rid of your implants. It's worth the investment.
No, it makes complete sense to me. I imagine that tissue that's affected is just sort of like an inflammatory machine, right? It's just creating more and more inflammation, essentially, right?
Yes, it absolutely is.
Okay, yeah. That's such good advice. And do you have any other advice for someone who might think that they have this and don't really know what to do? Like, is there a place to get support? Is there a place to find doctors who are doing these explants, the ones that you're talking about, the en bloc ones?
Yep. There are great resources now. So there is a huge Facebook group. It's called Breast Implant Illness Healing with Nicole, actually Nicole, just like you, Nicole. And I think that when I was in there were like 30,000 members. So across the United States, across the world, actually, there are recommendations for doctors on that Facebook group. And you do have to get like added to that Facebook group. But if you search for it, it should pop up. And then you're able to ask women who've gone through something similar, like where is a doctor in your area? Or even outside of your area. I've seen women, travel across state, across the country to get to a doctor that, is going to do a really good job taking out their implants. Like I said, I live in California, which is like, plastic surgery mecca. And so I had a whole like plethora of doctors to choose from. I did end up, actually interviewing 2 doctors, but went with my first choice. And she was fantastic. She's in Newport, Dr. Lavinia Chong. I highly recommend her. Call her office and just, ask. People are probably going to wonder too, like, how much is it exactly to take out your implants? So for her, I've had 4 children. And so I elected to also do a lift of my tiny boobies. At the same time, I had them removed. I was a D cup. We took them out. Now I am a nice firm A, which is definitely nothing like I used to be. But I was like, man, I don't want a droopy A. And so she right back up. And I do tell people I have a little, like I did keloid under one of my breasts. So I have what looks like a pirate scar under my little boobie, which I think looks kind of badass. So I'm not sad about it.
That is just really so helpful. And thank you for sharing all of that. Nobody talks about this stuff. Like, it's really so important to just have these conversations. It really is, because I just feel like there's probably a lot of shame and a mixed bag of feelings around doing something like this. Did you ever feel that, or do you have clients who feel those feelings? I'm sure it's really challenging to get through all of that and then go on to then have the surgery, and then you're changing your whole appearance. So I'm sure there's questions from people and looks or whatever people do.
Every single thing you just said is very common to any woman who's going through, an issue like this. It does change your identity. As a woman, like you said, we are kind of held to this like beauty standard, and it's ridiculous. It's unattainable. No woman's actually going to get there. However, for a lot of women who did have implants, like we do associate our femininity with our breasts, and so to remove it is going to be not only a physical undertaking for you, but it's an emotional undertaking too, and even a spiritual undertaking for some women. And it doesn't just affect us. Like I've been married to my husband now for 21 years. I told you we married when I was 19, and that man loved my boobs, bless his heart. So I told him this whole story. He was very supportive. He's always supportive, but he walked into our bedroom, I remember, with this like huge glass of bourbon, and he goes, "To your boobs. It's been a great run." He drank his bourbon. I'm like, I love you.
And hilarious. You've got to have some humor when it comes to all of this, right? I mean, you really have to.
Yes, that is that booby gallows humor for sure. But like I said, I mean, he was supportive, so I was very blessed in that way. But I mean, I do this for a living. I talk about hormonal health for a living. I have 4 children. I'm on Instagram with my daughter, my 16-year-old daughter, my 17-year-old son's friends, right? Like I know my audience includes some of these 17-year-old boys. And so putting my story out there was really vulnerable, but I also am passionate about empowering women. And, I thought I need to get this story out there. I need for other women to know, number one, it's okay to be nervous about this procedure. Number 2, there are others who have gone before you and it can be done. Number 3, like, let's call this out for what it is. Like, it doesn't all have to be, like fire and brimstone. Like, let's have a little bit of fun with this process that we have to go through anyways. There is a light at the end of the tunnel. So I was kind of embarrassed and ashamed. I didn't want to walk out without my boobs, and I didn't want to put it out there on Instagram and on my blog, but I was like, you know what, F it, I'm just going to do it. And it's turned out to be fine. People are looking at a different story the next day on their phone, but for those women who really need, the help and empowerment, I would like to help those women.
And it is just, I'm so glad that you've had this experience, obviously not for the stress of it, but just be your care, and you're speaking about it, and you're out in the world, and you're helping so many people with this. And I can't imagine, like, I think about, women who go through mastectomies, and I feel like to some degree it's similar, because you're removing your breasts essentially. And that is kind of what you did. And there's so much we have so much attachment to our physical attributes, like we just do. And I can only imagine how challenging and hard that was to navigate. But when I think about all of this knowledge that you have and how many people you're able to help, I imagine you must feel so almost honored, I suppose, that you're walking this path. And I imagine there's just so many people who are grateful for your work.
That's a beautiful word. And thank you, Nicole. I really am honored. Like, I do feel like it's a privilege to be able to like guide and empower women, because we don't have the education that we need. It wasn't given to us. So, being able, again, to just have a story and share that story is a great honor. And honestly, if my story turned out differently, I wouldn't feel as passionate about sharing it. But I have no psoriasis. I've lost 15 pounds. I don't have any yeast infections anymore. My hair is growing back. My skin looks better. My hormones are starting to regulate. Like, I can tell that this has been, a blessing for my body. I even like kind of rock my little boobies now. Like, sometimes I don't even wear a bra. It's fantastic.
That must be really nice. I hate not wearing a bra. Yeah, it's great. I mean, this is the whole point, right? To just hear that you have had remarkable changes. I feel like that is so motivating to someone. And, I'm curious about sort of managing like that post implant removal recovery. Is there anything that people should know about? Like, what is that journey like? And how long does it take?
Yeah, it's a major undergoing. It's a major surgery. And so, my recommendation for women is to treat it as such. Going up to my surgery, I was taking great care to get, plenty of animal protein every single day, making sure that I was taking, my supplements. I started taking an amino acid supplement as well, just for bioavailable protein for my body, because I knew we were going to be building a lot back up and it had a lot to heal. I was taking a lot of antioxidants before my surgery. However, you have to stop taking things like vitamin C about 2 weeks before surgery because that's a blood thinner. I really like the homeopathic preparation Arnica montana. And so I took that after my surgery for bruising and muscle soreness. But I also took the very strong painkillers that they gave me because it was a major surgery, right? So I did have to, I took those for about 3 days only. And then I had to get back to real life and start taking care of my kids. So I couldn't be, on painkillers. But there's at least a 3 to 7 day period where the surgeon will install drains. And so those are, the drains are in your body under your breast tissue. And so the fluid that naturally occurs as a byproduct of that surgery is going to drip out into the drains instead of into your body. So you will have to, empty out those drains, which is, blood and fluid. It's not pretty, and care for yourself well for at least those 3 to 5 days. Since I was in fairly good shape, I did bounce back fairly quickly. But I've had women who they actually got worse after their breast implants were removed. One of my colleagues, another FDN. So I'm not going to tell you it's going to solve every single issue. Please do not, quote me on that. It's kind of up to the body and just kind of depends on what your body does. But I have heard more healing stories than not. Again, you'll want to take great care of yourself for the period of time leading up to the surgery, and then make sure that you have rest and help for a week or so after surgery. One thing also you'll have to do is go back to your surgeon to get those drains removed. They're not very big. Like I have my phone charged right here on my computer. So the drain cord itself is about the width of an iPhone charger. So it's tempting for a lot of women to think they can just pull out the drain. You don't want to do that. You'll go back to your doctor and get the drain removed. They'll stitch you back up and then you can go, on your merry way, but still stay relatively still for a few days. Like I didn't get back to my regular workout routine for 6 weeks after surgery, which killed me, but ended up being a really good thing for my body.
Oh, I'm sure that was hard. Whoa. Okay. So that, I feel like that is such a process. I didn't really think that it was that involved. And so how long does that, obviously there's the surgery. And so what is the recovery time typically? Is that you said 4 to 6 weeks type of thing? Is that what you're mostly looking at to get back to life?
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, no, I was back to life in about 4 days. So like gingerly back to life, driving my kids around, like doing some low level preparation of like food and just like household chores because the show must go on if you're a mom, right? But it took about, I was walking again, like walking regularly about 10,000 steps a day within about 2 weeks with with the blessing of my doctor. And then I couldn't get back into the gym or back to my Pilates class until 6 weeks after surgery. And again, I was given the go ahead. And so I got right back to my workouts and did feel really, really good.
So amazing. It's so amazing. It's really helpful to sort of have a timeline and an understanding. I am curious, is there advice, I suppose, for anyone who's considering breast implants? Like, do you feel like no one should have breast implants? What are your thoughts on this? I know this is a hard question.
So hard to say. Here is the advice I got from my doctor. This is what she told me. Jennifer, small breasts are in. She said, if I'm doing breast implants now, they are very, very small breast implants. I'm like, that is so interesting to me. So the tide has kind of turned from like huge Pamela Anderson style breasts to like really, small, kind of like, young, whatever. So I can tell you the tide will shift for you if you're thinking about, getting implants in. These cycles just kind of like they happen every like 10 to 20 years. So give yourself a little bit of time, give yourself like a really deep thought as to what the, future implications health-wise could be. If you were already struggling with hormone issues, if you're listening to Nicole, you probably are, like you're here for a reason, right? So you are going to want to just take into account the fact that this could further debilitate your hormones, but it could also be totally fine. I have lots of friends that still have their implants 10, 20 years later, and they're fine. I'm not saying it affects everyone, but for people who tend to be highly sensitive or people who are already struggling with hormone issues, I just be a little bit more careful.
Yeah, because I'm just thinking, as you said, who are highly sensitive, I'm definitely one of those people. Hence the reason I'm here doing this work, right? I know, right? I feel like we're all in that boat. Yeah, you're highly sensitive, or you have some other underlying condition, or you have an autoimmune disease. I would imagine that breast implants would be a potentially really bad idea.
Yeah, we didn't really talk about that, but there is a strong correlation between the onset of new autoimmune symptoms and breast implants themselves. So they can not only mimic the symptoms of autoimmune disease, specifically lupus and Sjogren's syndrome, but also increase your propensity to getting one or more autoimmune disorders.
Wow. Okay. That's super helpful to hear. I feel like that's another big takeaway for anybody who's considering this. Is there anything else that if someone were to be considering breast implants that they should be thinking about, if, to maybe not do it if they have, I don't know, like not only autoimmune diseases, but something else perhaps?
Yeah, I mean, again, you'd try to consider like, where are you going to be in 2 years and 5 years and 10 years and 15 years? We have a kind of just this very like today mentality, I think. And so you'll want to consider your future self and the future health of your family. I mean, are you debilitated, going to be taking great care of your kids or your husband? Are you going to be showing up to be your best self at work? And maybe it's worth it for you and you want to show up at work or for your husband with great, fantastic boobs. Like that's totally fine if that's your choice. But again, nothing comes without a cost. So there will be a cost at some point. And, for a lot of women who got their implants 10, 20 years ago, now is a time where it's recommended that you get those removed and re-implanted. Like that's what surgeons recommend. Every 10 years, you're supposed to get a new set of implants because they know that those products deteriorate in the body. They know there's a risk associated with it. But I don't know one woman who has electively gone in to get a new set of implants, right? She just continues to keep her old ones and hopes for the best. So consider that too. You will have to go in for another surgery at some point, be it for breast implant illness or just for another set of implants.
Right. And another set of implants because they, like you said, they expire or they just start to become potentially problematic. And so you really should be doing that.
Well, the FDA does have a black box warning on all implants. So that's something else that your listeners need to know, is that we know that it is a highly toxic, highly hazardous substance. And so yes, the byproduct of a plastic is that it breaks down naturally. So that is the reason for the black box warning. And it is the reason that, at least a caring surgeon would recommend re-implanting every 10 to 20 years.
Okay, that's really helpful to know too. I feel like, every question I ask, there's another revelation, like mind-blowing revelation about breast implants that I had no idea about. No idea that there was a black box warning on them. So that's really good to know. So is there anything else that you want to share before we wrap up this episode with anyone who is potentially dealing with breast implant illness or maybe suspects it and just doesn't know what to do next?
Absolutely. Yeah. So search out that Facebook group, Breast Implant Illness Healing with Nicole. It's a great place to start. There are books written on this subject. There are some great websites. One is called thehealisreal.com. I actually got my Instagram hacked a couple of years ago, but I had a photo on my Instagram immediately after my surgery. My face was brighter. I had less inflammation, even though I just been in surgery for 8 hours and I was on pain medication. My eyes were brighter. The heal was immediate. Like you could see it. There was a visual, reflection of what was going on in my body. So, educating yourself, thehealisreal.com. I think I said that, but that's a great place for like breast implant illness healing stories and a lot more information. I also love to be educated as much as possible. So I'm not going to go into anything new or especially this big without gathering as much information as I can. So that would be my recommendation, is educate yourself, ask around. Most likely someone near to you has gone through an explant surgery and has a recommendation for a doctor or a process or, someone that you can talk to. So the truth is out there. The answers are out there. You just have to seek for it and search for it just a little bit.
Oh, thank you so much. This was so enlightening and amazing. I have learned so much. I would love for you to share where women can find you, because obviously you're helping women with this issue as well. And I feel like it would just be such a great resource so that they have your information as well.
Thanks, Nicole. And I've loved it, by the way. So thank you for having me. You can find me at jenniferwoodwardnutrition.com, and I'm on Instagram, Jennifer Woodward Wellness, not nutrition, because again, I got hacked, so I had to change my name. Jennifer Woodward Wellness on Instagram.
Wait, it's true. We didn't even talk about the fact that you got hacked. I know you mentioned it and I didn't even say anything to it. And I truly, it's like my worst nightmare. It's just terrible when you own a business. And yeah, it's not cool. Not cool at all. But yeah, anyways, okay. So we have all your information. Jennifer, thank you so much. This is great. And for everyone who's listening, yes, I have a puppy here. I have been fostering her. She is play fighting with the other dogs and everybody's barking. So I've been trying to keep myself on mute as best I can. And Jennifer's been amazing. So thank you all for listening. And Jennifer, thank you so much again. I can't wait for this episode to be out in the world.
Thanks again, Nicole. It was truly an honor. I've been following you for a really long time, so I appreciate it.
Thank you. Thank you for saying that. Oh my gosh, I'm so happy that you said that. Thank you.
That's a wrap. Be sure to click that subscribe button to join me for more Girl Talk Gone Menstrual in upcoming episodes. But in the meantime, check out my latest Period Party episode. And if you're looking for a deeper dive into your hormones, go ahead and take my period quiz at nicolejardim.com/quiz.